You visit Greece on 18th of October on World Bioethics Day 2024, and you gave a speech on the theme against discrimination and stigmatization, two of the most fundamental principles of human dignity and human rights. What was the main topic, and in what situations in global society do you find this happening?
So the main feature of discrimination is negative social attitudes and prejudices against people, groups of people, without any moral basis. So the main project to reduce discrimination is to change people's attitudes. But my project was to also argue that there is an important other way in which we can address stigmatisation and discrimination, and that is by correcting natural inequality. All the features of ourselves, the diseases we'll suffer from, our height, our weight, our appearance, our abilities, musical abilities, cognitive abilities, these are all partly determined by our biology and in particular our genetics. And one possibility today is to raise up the most disadvantaged. So in addition to social measures like education, and re-education of people, I think we can also be looking at the possibility of enhancing human beings and as a way of reducing the natural inequality that exists with genetic lottery.
I read a variety of things about your scientific work, and I noticed that the most important part of that it was procreative beneficence. In other words, that means that the parents could order their child, maybe the sex, and probably more other characteristics. Do you really believe is that moral? Another option could support that something like this could cancel God or nature.
So procreative beneficence is the principle that couples should select the embryo which has the best chance of the best life. So this is a very common sense principle, really, when you think about it. If you have two embryos and one is more likely to have a longer life or a happier life or less disease, you should select that embryo. So this happens all the time. When in Europe, couples can select embryos which have a lower chance of genetic diseases, like thalassemia is common here. That's an example of procreative beneficence. But of course, how well our lives go, how good our lives are, not just determined by whether we're healthy, it's determined by our character, our abilities, our limitations. And procreative beneficence says that not only should we choose, not only do we have a moral obligation to select children who are going to be healthier, we should also choose those children or embryos that have the traits that are more likely to give that child a good life. Now, people will say there are many differences between individuals and it's all social. And that may be true for a large number of cases, but in some circumstances, some lives are clearly better than others. For example, very poor impulse control is something that makes people's lives go worse because they can't defer gratification. They can't defer small rewards now for larger rewards in the future. So if we can choose children who start off life with the greatest opportunity, why not? What reason is there not to do that?
In which countries can we see something like that?
Well, in America, this is already being done. Not only can you choose for a child that doesn't have a genetic disorder, you can use what are called polygenic scores. These are scores for much more common diseases, like diabetes, heart disease, and pick the embryo which has the lowest chances genetically of developing those diseases. Of course, genes are not everything. Even if you start with the best hand, you can still develop, and you will still develop diseases, but the chances are lower. And indeed, you could even extend this to traits like intelligence. You could select embryos that are predicted to be more intelligent than others.
Maybe in the next few years, this method, procreative beneficence, will be something familiar to humanity, maybe. Do you believe that there should be a legal framework? Do you have any suggestions in order to be written a global law based on human rights?
Many people object that procreative beneficence is eugenics. And what they have in mind there is Nazi eugenics. And the characteristics of Nazi eugenics was that it was involuntary. People were sterilised against their will. It was aimed to realise a certain racist, social Darwinist view of society. Modern clinical genetics gives people the choice, so they can choose to have genetic screening or not. And it's aimed at conditions that promote health. My argument, which is a very simple one that should be welcome in Greece, is we should move beyond just health to well-being. What matters to us is a good life. What matters is our well-being. And genes don't determine how happy we are. They don't determine whether we have a good life, but they have an influence. And insofar as science can provide reliable information about factors that change that, we should use that knowledge. So we need to make sure it's voluntary, it's based on good science, and it's based on a robust conception of well-being. Now, that's the greatest philosophical question that you've debated since, Socrates. What is a good life? But we have to answer that question. And we have to answer it not only for procreative beneficence, but to understand the progress of your society or how to educate your children. So we need to address this question of well-being. And genetics is just another part where this will play a part.
Do you believe that the governments around the world will support or not?
There are many different governments in the world now. We don't have...
For example, in Europe, do you believe that they will support something like that? Or?
This will be resisted in Europe for a long time because they live under the spectre of the Second World War. And a very, strong concern for a particular conception of human rights. China, for example, has a different framework, a different outlook. They're very concerned.
They agree or they disagree?
I think they would agree. Most of the research into the genetics of intelligence is going on in China. You've already seen embryos gene-edited in China.
Finally, I realized you support the utilitarianism theory. Could you explain the reasons and your vision? And let me ask you if you believe that the humans are in the first level around the world, or there is something out there like God?
So utilitarianism is a very simple moral theory. It says that everyone's well-being, everyone's happiness matters equally, whether you're the king or a pauper. So it's very egalitarian. Your happiness matters just the same as mine. And it says the right action is the action which brings about the most well-being or happiness in the world. Now, that is a very good place to start in deciding what to do. Because if you don't do that, somebody's life is worse. So you have to have a very good justification for that. Now, maybe your justification is we need to correct historical injustice, for example, or we need to give more attention to equality. But you have to have a good reason. So utilitarianism for me is a very good place to start in ethics. Does it mean that humans matter first? Yes, they do. What matters is how well people's lives go. That's the basic currency of ethics. So I'm agnostic about God, but I think if God does exist, he wants to see humanity flourish. He wants to see people having good lives. And insofar as we can promote that, I'm fairly confident that's what God would want.